Europe.
Okay, we'd like to begin. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. First of all, I'd like to thank the CBD for this opportunity. This is really special for us. I'd like to read a few words that appear on this magazine, on the back cover. The quote is, "The world grows smaller and smaller, more and more interdependent. Today, more than ever, life must be characterized by a sense of universal responsibility, not only nation to nation and human to human, but also to other forms of life." This quote was by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it appears on the back cover of this edition of Kyoto Journal, which is titled Biodiversity, Japan Satoyama, and Our Shared Future. This issue and a parallel online edition, some of the slides you're seeing up here are only on our online edition, features over 70 contributors, scientists, poets, nature writers, academics, artists from all around the world. And this issue was made by a small group of very dedicated editors that began making the issue about 9 months ago in Kyoto. And we made the issue expressly for the delegates at COP10. We made it to bring here and to hand to them personally. Our magazine has usually covered cultural topics, and Kyoto Journal has been sort of an experiment in independent, all-volunteer-based media for the past 23 years. We are lucky to be supported by the Heian Bunka Center, which is a calligraphy education institution. So my name is John Einarsan, and I'm the founding editor, and along with me are the people who helped put this issue together, especially a special 22-page section on Satoyama, the ideal and the real. So this is Stewart Wachs, and he's KJ's associate managing editor, and he was the chief editor of this issue. And next is Brian Williams, who is a landscape artist, wonderful watercolor paintings of Satoyama landscape in Japan. He's also a very ardent and knowledgeable environmentalist, especially on Japan. And lastly, Jane Singer, who teaches environmental studies at Kyoto University. And we have one more who got swallowed up by the conference. She's somewhere, Winifred Bird, who's an environmental journalist. We have produced special issues before. One was on the sacred mountains of Asia. Another was on the Japanese countryside, similar theme. Another one was media in Asia. Another one was gender in Asia. Another one was indigenous peoples of Asia. We even did a special issue on Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, in which the Japanese have refused to engage in war forever. And many, many years ago, we even produced an issue that we brought to delegates at COP3, where the Kyoto Protocol was forged. So it's a very meaningful and nice thing for us to link these two conferences with our magazine and be able to bring a bit of spirit and poetry from the ancient capital, Kyoto, to COP10. For biodiversity, we invited people from different areas of specialization, different countries, different fields, to speak directly to delegates and express their concerns at this historically critical point in time. In my 23 years of creating this magazine, I have never seen so many people work so hard on an issue. This was truly hard work. This is because this theme touches us deep down. It goes down into our bones because we know that we all belong to this one family of life. So it goes deep. People know it. People care. And So like many, many people elsewhere, we are deeply concerned about the state of nature and sincerely wish for COP10 delegates to embrace their conscience, find courage and vision to construct bold policies that will preserve and celebrate life. This issue is our heartfelt support for their efforts. It's our offering, it's our gift. It's something we could do. I'd like to mention just a few of the people that are featured in the issue. It includes many, many, but some of them include famous nature writers like Barry Lopez, Vandana Shiva, Gary Snyder, Bill McKibben, Caroline Fraser. There's an excellent essay by a high school student called The Wonder of Life, Sam Levin. There's an interview with a Shinto priest. There's also wonderful seaweed artwork by Japanese artist Noda Michio. She presses seaweed. She's been doing it for 30 years. We have essays by visionary taxonomist Quentin Wheeler, eco-economist Pavan Sukhdev, Zen Roshi Susan Murphy, and a piece by Ainu storyteller Yuki Koji. So that's about what I have to say, and I will pass it on to my colleagues from now on.
Why don't you go next? I'm an editor. I'm a backdoor man. I want Brian to speak.
As we sit here in front of you, we're keenly aware of our own inadequacy, but at the same time of our very diverse set of experiences and knowledge and passions that have been focused on this magazine. I think it's extraordinary in that it for a problem, the decimation of biodiversity on our planet, through by diverse reasons, we have brought together a magazine that suggests a diverse range of solutions, ranging from the spiritual, John mentioned Zen Roshi, through the forefront of statistical nonlinear analysis, Dr. George Sugihara from the University of California at San Diego, through people such as Jane Goodall, who is not only a famous naturalist, but has also started a program called Roots and Shoots, educating young people in protecting local biodiversity. And in our issue, there's an interview with her and the famous journalist Bill Moyers. So we have a very diverse, if you will, set of possible solutions and organization or presentation of various kinds of understandings of this problem of biodiversity, which is more crucial than humanity at large seems to realize as yet. As we look at this conference, the two key points that, as far as I understand it, seem to be the access and benefit sharing protocol, which is to be discussed, sharing the benefits of technological advances derived from biodiversity with indigenous communities. The track record on that so far is, I would say, hardly encouraging. When we see a major multinational like Monsanto able to sue a farmer for the pollen that drifted onto his cornfields, and the farmer had to take the case all the way to the Canadian Supreme Court and did not win. So, and we see, which I find personally ridiculous, almost beyond words, large corporations patenting things like basmati rice or neem, the neem tree oil. One of our articles is an article on corporations run amok with no real responsibility except to their own bottom line. It's almost the psychology of a cancer cell. And in response to that, this article talks about the response to it being analogous to an immune response, like helper T cells or white cells in the own body, in the body of the infected or host. In other words, that activists should think not in a monolithic way, but more as immune cells in the body politic. We also have in this conference a large discussion looming on the issue of reserves that are to be set aside, both terrestrial and marine. There's, as I understand it, wide range of proposed figures. The Japanese government is proposing a figure of 15% for terrestrial and 15% for marine. I understand that the Chinese government is holding out for a maximum of 6%. I, for one, if it was totally verifiable and these reserves were in fact truly to be protected, would be minimally satisfied with 6, as long as it were really true. However, and this is where our magazine has, I feel, a contribution to make, there's a third area that's crucial to biodiversity, and that is the areas that, at this point, humans have arrogated to their own use, and in most cases, almost brutally, exclusively to their own use. Anything that gets in their way is eradicated. I speak of agricultural lands, I speak of forestry areas, I speak of coastal fishery zones, I speak of rivers, and I speak of urban areas. And we want to make the point that there is no possibility of protecting and fostering biodiversity on this planet if we do not incorporate the protection and the fostering of biodiversity within these human use areas. And that, we feel, is the basic concept of what's called in Japan Satoyama. We make the point that it's not only Japan that has these areas of traditional land use that supported rich human communities, that if you really looked at the biological productivity of the land, in fact outstrip modern chemicalized agriculture, sometimes by a factor of 2 or 3. It's just that it's not monocultural. And these areas are part of the R&D, the human part of the R&D research and development that's been going on in our planet ever since life began. And the human aspect of it began perhaps with agricultural. So the Japanese high land use area is the Satoyama, and Jane Singer is here to talk to you about that.
Okay. I think this week and next you'll be hearing a lot of this term Satoyama. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to explain a little bit about our understanding of what Satoyama is, what it means, what we can learn from our experience in Japan. Satoyama and the Satoyama Initiative present the Japanese way of life as a model for sustainable agriculture. And there will be many events that the Japanese government and others are promoting with that theme. What is Satoyama? Basically, Satoyama refers to the traditional, rural, agriculturally productive landscapes that fostered biodiversity. In traditional Satoyama, there was a great variety of a mosaic of different kinds of landscapes: forests, rice fields, rivers, mountains, and marshes. And all of these helped farmers to produce more. They were able to get from variegated secondary forests, they were able to get firewood, they could get charcoal, they could get nuts, they could get green manure, and a whole variety of goods and services that were essential for their lives. You may think, from what you hear about Satoyama, that traditionally Japanese farmers, Japanese in general, were somehow wiser, more in touch with nature than the rest of us. And that wasn't always the case, and there have been cases of great denuding, great deforestation traditionally in Japan. The reason Satoyama flourished and the reason biodiversity flourished is because this is the way that people in a very small island country with very little arable land were able to maximize their resources and produce the most goods and services to help richen their lives.
did it at a time. They did that at a time when population growth was running very fast for them.
Yeah, Japan has always been one of the most densely populated nations on Earth. But since World War II, there's been a huge change in Satoyama landscapes. And if you look around, you'll find many of the rivers have been lined with concrete. The fields have been standardized, you might say, combined, right? Much of the wildlife that was formerly flourishing, such as especially the bird life that flourished on the paddy fields, is now endangered and on the red list. And a lot of that is because of government policy, pro-economic growth policy, and the consequent depopulation of the countryside. So we, as people who are not scientists, but people who live in Japan and look around us, wondered why there seemed to be such a big disconnect between the Satoyama ideal that is often held out to us and the real when we look around the countryside. That was sort of the impetus for us, for three of us, Brian, Winifred Bird, and myself, to work on this special issue. And one thing that I found from working on this is that no matter how wonderful and sustainable a lifestyle is, it needs to have support from the top in order to continue. We do hope that the Japanese government, as well as promoting this Satoyama initiative, tries to do a bit more to promote Satoyama itself in its own nation, to help revitalize local economies, to help to revitalize agriculture itself in Satoyama, and give us a bit more hope that, yes, Satoyama is not just a sustainable way of life of the past, but it's one that can continue into the future.
I'd like to interject at this point. Jane mentioned a moment ago the disconnect between the ideal and the real. We prepared a small guide. Due to our limited budget, it's not a glossy, full-color presentation, but it is printed in green ink. And along with what it basically is a description of various sites very near Nagoya.
It's inserted in the magazine.
Delegates and other NGOs and media representatives can very easily visit, see for their own eyes the real. The Ise Jingu, the famous shrine at Ise, is almost a sanctuary of biodiversity and an area that's been put off limits to development since the 6th century. And that's also very near. But along with that, there is some tidal flats in Ise Bay, the very last ones that had not been filled in. And they were not filled in not because of government policies, but simply because citizens groups organized to prevent the landfill that would have obliterated them. So there's some biodiversity thankfully preserved there in what we call Satoumi, the near ocean. That's a land use area for people, but also has biodiversity, as Tokyo Bay was very richly during the Edo period. There's also a guide to a small a scrap of mountain that included a secondary managed forest and a few rice paddies. It's called Hirabari Satoyama. It's the center of a controversy, a struggle now between developers on the one side and a citizens organization on the other. One to turn it into a subdivision, the other to preserve it as a learning place for what Satoyama used to be in Japan. There is a guide to the estuary dam on the Nagara River, which until its ill-considered construction a few years back was the only river in Japan that was not dammed from source to mouth. It was rich in biodiversity of fish, of invertebrates such as mollusks, bryozoans that lived in the vast reed beds. A bryozoan, you may not know this, but can filter up to 5 times its own weight in water every day. So a reed bed with bryozoans living in it will purify the water around it very, very effectively. It's a perfect little example of some of the services that biodiversity, ecosystem services that biodiversity will provide. All this existed in the Nagoya River until the pro-construction lobby, which has controlled the Japanese government for much of the last half-century, pushed through this barrage, the Nagoya River barrage, the estuary dam. So there's a guide to that as well. If anyone's interested, we have easy-to-follow directions. You can go to a variety of sites very near Nagoya, 1-2 hour trips, and see for yourselves the reality. In our magazine and in other presentations by other NGO groups, you will be able to see the ideal, which we all hope to work towards. Thank you. We have a few minutes left. I'll pass it back to my colleagues.
I'd like to give people an opportunity to ask questions if they'd like. And yes?
Thank you. Vanya Walker-Lee, Sustainable Mediterranean. How much support do you have for your ideas from the farming community, from the big farmers and from the small farmers? And are you getting any interest from the government?
Well, the way your question is phrased implies that we're at the forefront for fighting for Satoyama. That's really not the case, and the truth in advertising here. But I will say this. The average age of a farmer in Japan is 67 years at this point, last time I checked, and it's rapidly getting older. Japan produces perhaps 2% of the world's food, uses 10% of the world's agrochemicals to do so. All agricultural production, or virtually all agricultural production in Japan, is sold through the Nokyo, that is to say, the agricultural cooperative, they were set up after the war, and they're basically a quasi-governmental organization. Farmers at this point, except for a few visionaries, are not really focused on the kinds of solutions that will lead to sustainable, richly biodiverse farming in this country. I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's the reality.
On the other hand, I've been picking up something interesting since we issued this edition of the journal. On the blogosphere, I've noticed sites such as Agro-Biodiversity and Muddy Green and these other blogs which are very interested in these issues, and some of them, it turns out, are not even aware of what Satoyama is, and they're getting quite excited to discover the concept and the idea. So I think in that sense we seem to be having some influence going that way, but as Brian said, we're not certainly in the forefront of this or anything. But it's been very educational for us to study it. I mean, Brian lives in a Satoyama landscape. I live in an urban landscape. Working together on this has been really interesting from that standpoint. I've learned a great deal. Yeah, we'd like to take more questions.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Just very briefly, a question of clarification. I see that one of your essays is from Thomas Berry, but there's no indication where you got it from, and there's no dating on the Ecozoic era. I think it would have been helpful if you gave the historical background to the article. It might be very helpful. And then
he passed away.
Yeah, it's a good point.
That's a very good point. I think in the contributors page, does it indicate anything?
What?
That's a very apt criticism.
No, it's not meant to be a criticism. It's just to help.
Criticism can be constructive, and yours certainly is. Thank you.
There's a bit in the back.
It's in the back, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it gives the date, huh?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
On the last page, there's a page that lists contributors and a brief description.
We couldn't pass out magnifiers for it, but...
But the other point that you're making is the Satoyama concept. could have some very good allies outside of Japan. I just came from a meeting in Bangkok in which a certain fellow named Nipot has been working with the indigenous people in Chiang Mai in northern Thailand. And when he was there as a very young Catholic priest, he started to work with their songs because that put them in touch with their sense of who they were in relation to the earth. And then he went further and asked them to go back to their dry paddy farming, if you will, or agriculture, and to avoid the pressure of Bangkok to produce exotic vegetables for the hotels. And when they did so, 35 species of birds and the Thai tiger came back to that area. So there's a great sense of what you're pointing out that in Satayama that has already shown a great deal of fruition elsewhere in Asia. So I would encourage you in an outreach in that regard.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful story to hear. And I think we tried to stress that a bit in our issue, that in fact these kinds of land use practices, traditional land use practices, are not exclusive to Japan. They can be found everywhere. In some cases, they were so successful that Western explorers entering the Amazon jungle, for example, or the jungles in Bali, thought that they were walking through virgin forest, when in fact they were walking through highly exploited areas that were also rich in biodiversity. Yeah, I think that's a point that needs to be brought out, and it's also a point that can serve as an indication for directions that we as a species on this planet need to be going in.
We have 31 web-exclusive features. There was so much wonderful and diverse material, we had to make some very hard choices as to what went into the print issue as a mix. And there's a lot of very good material that's just on the web alone, and we invite you. There's a lot of the print material is available too, but I just posted something a couple days ago by Peter Berg about Ecuador, which was about reforesting there, and it's called The Unexpected Benefits of Promoting Biodiversity, I think it was. And he talks there about something like you just described, where the replanting of these trees brought about, not only in the non-human species, but also he talks about the effect on the humans in the community, and I encourage you to read it, by Peter Berg. If you go to our website, you'll see where the online exclusives are.
I think what Stewart is getting at is that, and it's a point I made earlier, is that we try to have a diverse approach to the problems of biodiversity. Spiritual, intensely practical, historically and analytical, and poetic. And I think that's perhaps a unique thing in this conference. Most NGOs here will be focused on a single issue. The people who preceded us, they were spectacular. They're a hard act to follow. And I'm 120% behind them on high carbon areas being also areas of high biodiversity, and so that there's a synergistic positive effect between climate change and biodiversity preservation. But for the average person, most of these discussions are the average person who watches Saturday night football or the soccer or cricket or you name it, or is concerned about their job or getting fuel or food, they need something more basic. They need some more basic tools to get them behind this crucial effort. And I think the spiritual tools and the cultural tools that are also going to be needed in this fight to preserve and foster biodiversity are crucial. And that's one of the things that this magazine also focuses on.
I just wanted to say that one of the problems maybe is how does media express biodiversity, and it seems like media is not doing a very good job. I was just saying there's this one article in our issue about a group in England who have come together, and they brought all the best wildlife photographers together, and they said, can we work and can we create these beautiful images as a way to teach the public about biodiversity. And this is also an extremely wonderful project. And so I encourage you to maybe take a look at this article. It's by Peter Cairns. It's called 2020 Vision, Reinventing Conservation Media.
Yeah. Do we have a moment longer? Yeah. On the subject of media and on the subject of jobs, if I can take a moment, I don't know how many of you are specifically with media organizations, or whether you're with, whether you're bloggers or NGOs, but I have, in my career, been very concerned since way back in journalism school, when I was mentored by Ben Bagdikian, a great man who wrote a book called The Media Monopoly, which was all about the loss of diversity in the media and the consolidation of media ownership and the effects it would have on reporting. This has been a major concern of mine, and one of the reasons I've been devoted to this journal for a long time. And I've seen something at this conference arriving today that was stunning to me, which is that they're saying 16,000 people are going to attend where they expected 7,000. But they're also saying that the number of media who are coming are stunningly lower than expected. I think the media are like a fished-out ocean at this point. And I think that the people in the media are aware of the danger their jobs are facing, and they should consider themselves something like an endangered species. On the other hand, there are technologies available. One of the articles we put online is by a young graduate student in marine biology, again, Del Rey. He says that you can use the same technology that you use to catch a fish to preserve a fishery. And I think that people are beginning to understand that there is a technology for publishing. We're looking at it right now. It's the web. There is a way of reaching out and publishing. And the people still need to figure out how to make it economically viable, even after all these years. But we were able to bring all the material that we found of value to an audience. There's again Del Rey's pieces right there, those pieces. So I think Barry Lopez, who certainly has no trouble finding audiences, he was the very last person Bill Moyers interviewed on his Bill Moyers Journal, and he's in here. And he says that biodiversity is not a condition of life, it's a condition for life. It's a prerequisite for life itself. And I think that's also true for the media, that diversity of perspectives that's our message. Good. Diversity of media is a part of this whole story that we're all here caring about. So thank you for considering that point of view. Okay. I think that music tells us we're done.
Okay. Thank you for coming. If you have any questions, please ask later, and we have some press releases with much more detailed information and magazines available as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.